the first 6 games of the season for violating the NFL's personal conduct policy. The suspension follows Rice's guilty plea to third-degree felony charges related to a March 2024 car crash in Dallas. So let's take a look at what his absence might mean for the Chiefs. Although they did make it back to the Super Bowl, the wide receiver group was underwhelming after Rice got hurt in Week 4. From weeks 5 through 18, Chiefs wide receivers averaged the second fewest yards per reception, ranked 21st or worst in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. Mina, how can they make sure they get more out of that wide receiver group to start the season without Rice, now that they know he'll be out for 6 games?
You know, it's going to look like a lot like it did in the second half of last season, Laura. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. While they didn't get a ton of production out of the receivers, it was still an efficient offense. The Chiefs used a ton of 12, 13 personnel, putting multiple tight ends on the field. I think they figured out how best to utilize Xavier Worthy, not primarily as a downfield threat, but using him more on shallow concepts against man coverage underneath, manufactured touches. To me, though, the biggest thing that they can do to improve upon what we saw at the end of last year without Rice is not really about the receivers. Also, I should mention Hollywood Brown being back at some point could help, but more about the run game. This was the least explosive rushing attack in all of football last year. Isaiah Pacheco played briefly in the preseason game against Chicago, and I thought he looked more explosive than he did last season, so I think there's hope that farther removed from the injury, maybe they can get more from him on the ground. I think, to me, if they can get more out of him, coupled with understanding how to use Worthy and then hopefully having some Hollywood Brown at some point, the offense can be, at minimum, at least as good as it was in the second half of last season.
Mina, I'm a little bit more optimistic. If you go back a year ago, they averaged 6.2 air yards per attempt, which was 29th in the league. And to me, it was all about him not being comfortable with a very suspect
Oh, yeah,
offensive
or
line.
that.
Yeah. Josh Simmons, to me, is going to be outcome determinative of this group because I think he is a guy that, if he was healthy, would have been in the top 10. And if he's well protected, I think Patrick Mahomes can get the ball down the field. So as you mentioned, Xavier Worthy, if Hollywood Brown's healthy. Smith-Schuster can't run anymore, but he's really reliable. He's almost like a pass-catching tight end. So it is far from ideal until they get Rashee Rice back. But Josh Simmons, to me, really improves that offensive line, and I think that gives them a degree of explosiveness because Mahomes will be more protected than he was a year ago.
Yeah, and everything we've heard out of Kansas City so far about Josh Simmons, the rookie left tackle, has been extremely positive. They believe he's ready to step in day one and be what they thought he would be when they drafted him. So that's good news. You know, Xavier Worthy got a lot better as the season went along. The Chiefs felt like DeAndre Hopkins being there was a help to him, helping teach him about route running. They're in pretty good shape. I mean, Isaiah Pacheco, I think they feel like he maybe came back from the injury last year a little too quickly, trying to make it for that playoff run, and he'll be better now that he's back to full health. They drafted a running back in the 7th round, Brashard Smith, who is a converted wide receiver. They have some plans for him in terms of how they plan to use him and his pass-catching ability. And that's not don't blow that off. Isaiah Pacheco was a 7th round rookie who made an impact for a Super Bowl champion Chiefs team once upon a time.
Ah, it's great insight. By the way, I've got some fantasy drafts coming up. I'm keeping track of all this info. It sounds pretty good. The Chiefs have the second hardest schedule in the AFC, according to ESPN Analytics. Something to keep in mind, too. All right, let's go to the Dolphins. They lost big pieces on both sides of the ball. Jonnu Smith led the team in receiving after Week 9 last season and was traded to the Steelers. They also lost 2023's rushing touchdown leader, Raheem Mostert, and guard Robert Jones. On defense, they lost Jalen Ramsey, Javon Holland in the secondary, and they lost Calais Campbell and Emmanuel Ogbah from their front four. It's a lot of differences on this team. GM Chris Greer was asked about the moves yesterday.
When you go and you make aggressive moves like we had made for a few years, you have to reset again and start it over because it's just not sustainable the way the contracts are with players and what they're making now. So like a year ago, we were one of a couple teams with all the 1-year vet contracts and stuff, and so we're in a different spot now, adding the young players. So that's the direction we're going right now, and we've been very happy so far.
Yeah, it's such a unique peek into the cycle of the NFL, and if you don't capitalize when you have more money, just what happens. Mina, what is your reaction to hearing those comments from Greer?
He's right. And when you do spend big on veterans the way they have last few years, you got to hit on draft picks afterwards. To me, that's going to determine how this Miami Dolphins season goes on both sides of the ball, but particularly offensively. I'm looking at that offensive line and the two players that I think are going to be key for them, Patrick Paul at left tackle and then Jonas Avenea at guard. Austin Jackson at right tackle opposite Paul has been good, I think. And then on the other side, they drafted Kenneth Grant in the first round. And he's going to have an incredible opportunity, pardon me, because they have really good pass rushers in Miami. But he also has big shoes to step in. Calais Campbell's gone. So whether or not those young players in the trenches on both sides can make a difference this year, I think is going to be determinant of whether or not the Dolphins are competitive.
Yeah, what's interesting to me about Miami is, like, we've talked a lot about what they don't have, but when you look at what they do have, when it starts with Tua, Jalen Waddle, and Tyreek Hill, when those three players are on the field, they're 22-14 over the last 3 seasons. So we know they could score points. And, Mina, as you mentioned, they could also rush a passer. Jalen Phillips, if he's healthy, Bradley Chubb, if he's healthy, along with Chop Robinson. Now, look, there's a lot of questions about their secondary. They just added Jack Jones, Rasul Douglas over the last couple of days. They have Storm Duck. A lot of questions back there. But I know this. If you could rush the passer consistently, it allows you to cover up some vulnerabilities on the back end. So they can do the hard things well, score and rush the passer, and hopefully that will be more than enough to make up for, again, some of the other questions they have.
You know, the Dolphins started 2-6 last year. Then they won 6 of their next 8. And if you talk to people in that building, they'll tell you that that 8-game stretch showed them sort of who was with the program, and they wanted to lean into some of those guys. And when they did add veterans this offseason, they tried to get guys with good leadership reputations. Willie Gay, the linebacker, Minkah Fitzpatrick, the safety. So they really feel like it's been about almost like a culture reset there, and that Mike McDaniel, the head coach, has told the team several times, last year gives us a chance to kind of reset and not have to deal with outside expectations and focus on our work. So they feel like they're trying to get it back to basics there. Of course, the one thing everyone says with the Dolphins when you talk about their prospects this year is, well, we got to keep the quarterback healthy.
You know, Dan, I was there when we drafted Minkah Fitzpatrick, and he is a guy that will hold others accountable. He is a quarterback of the defense. He has rare leadership, in my opinion, for someone that is a safety. So I totally agree with what you're saying. And ironically about their record, typically Miami wants to play a lot of those home games early, take advantage of the heat down there. Hopefully they'll get off to a better start this year.
Yeah, and then they hope they can finish stronger. It's been December collapses, too, that have been sort of the commentary on a lot of their recent seasons when they started out strong.
Live 1 week from NFL kickoff, AFC North, the division favorite Ravens. Last year's MVP runner-up Lamar Jackson has received the most handle, 43% of bets on ESPN Bet Sportsbook, to win a third MVP. Joe Burrow has received the most MVP tickets on ESPN Bet Sportsbook, would be his first such honor. Burrow's received 18% of all wagers in that market. Next, we have the Steelers and their track record of staying above 500 with Aaron Rodgers under center. Over 8.5 wins, the most bet on win total on ESPN Bet Sportsbook. And lastly, we have last year's last place finishers. Despite being third on the Browns depth chart, Shedeur Sanders has received the 5th most handle to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. As alluded to, the Ravens, odds-on favorite to win the AFC North. That's some number for a third straight season on ESPN Bet Sportsbook. Minus 160. Bengals plus 260. Steelers north of plus 550 there. And the Browns, they haven't won the division since it was called the AFC Central, 1989.
They're still there, Phil. They're still there. You can't count them out.
Yeah, when they were going up against the Houston Oilers. Erin Dolan, before she was born, that was the last time the Browns won the division. She joins us now to talk about this competitive quartet now, the AFC North. Erin, Kate, what are your favorite plays?
Thank God I'm not a Browns fan, and at least my team wins. Don't forget they won the Super Bowl last year. Let me get to it. All right, let's look at some Bengals player props. We'll start with Jamar Chase, Offensive Player of the Year. He's coming off an incredible season. He won the receiving Triple Crown. He was absolutely elite despite that 9-8 record. I really think he can be good once again because you know who's going to be under center? It's going to be Joe Burrow. And this guy has insane chemistry with him that goes all the way back to LSU. And now when you look at this market, you see the running back, of course, is the favorite right now in Saquon Barkley. A running back has won the last 2 seasons. But if the Bengals Bengals make any waves this season, it's going to be on the back of Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. So I do think Chase could have a really big season. So going with him Offensive Player of the Year, and then Joe Burrow to lead the league in passing yards. Now, he led the league in passing yards last season as well as passing touchdowns. He was just one of 3 quarterbacks to end the season with 40 passing touchdowns. But I just think knowing that this team throws the ball 63% of the time, they scored the 6th most points in the league, they are going to have a big season. They will have to put up big points because that defense is not as good as some of the other teams in the AFC North. So those are 2 player props I'm looking at for the Bengals this upcoming season.
A lot of good analysis there. Not necessarily in disagreement when it comes to what she says about Chase and Burrow. I'm just not a fan of the team getting themselves to 10 wins this year. They had 2 big problems last year, defense and O-line. They did very little to next to nothing to address either of those. And this is what they might be up against this year like they were last year. Games where they scored 30 or more points. Yeah. Those are games you should win. They went 4-4. Wow. Compared to the rest of the league with notable teams, Baltimore was 11-0 in those matchups. Yeah. Buffalo was 11-1 when they scored 30 points. Philly was 5-1. So ultimately, that's a team where they're going to need, 40 a game to win? I'd go under the 9.5.
The last team to lose 4 games and scoring 30 or more points, the Chiefs in 2002. Aaron, make the case. Why do you like the over for the Bengals in this division?
If I recall, Joe has not given out an over on any team this year. I don't know if you expect the entire league to stink or something, but I do like the Bengals to go over a 9.5. They got to 9 wins last season after a really slow start, starting off 1-4. They're scheduled, they're middle of the pack. It's not that difficult. And if you look at their schedule to start off this season, you're playing at the Browns, which we've already just put a sad, sour taste in anybody's mouth if you are a Browns fan. And then you got the Jags, the Vikings. It's not going to be difficult to start the season, so maybe they gain that momentum. It is going to be difficult weeks 13 to 15 when you play the Ravens twice as well as the Bills packed in there, but that team gets better as the year goes on. So I do like them to hit over their win total of 9.5, despite that defense really not making much improvement. I do think it's one of those years the Bengals will be good.
Yeah, in the last 3 years, they've gone 0-2, 0-2, 0-3 to start. If they go 0-2 against the Browns and Jags, it's going to be trouble in Cincinnati. Anita, Joe and Aaron have been trading jabs. What's a play you like in the AFC North?
I have a sneaky good play, and that's tight end for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Geno Smith, over 550.5 receiving yards. I know we haven't heard a lot about him so far in the preseason, but when Mike Tomlin talks about this, about him, literally drool is coming out of his mouth. Arthur Smith has experience with him. Let's not forget, Smith was with Arthur Smith, Smith and Smith combined, in Atlanta and Tennessee. When he was in Atlanta, 582 receiving yards. Let's not forget he put up 884 with the Dolphins last year. He's dynamic. He's versatile. He's got Aaron Rodgers now as his quarterback.
Oh.
And also, I'm saying if he can find some protection, I think Aaron Rodgers can do some damage. And the matchup, Cincinnati, Indy, and Cleveland, especially early, some really favorable matchups against defenses that do not play well against opposing tight ends. I think Smith is going to be a sneaky good play this year, and I do like over 550.5 receiving yards.
And I like Smith over his touchdown prop because he had 8 last year, tied his career high with, which he set in 2020 with Arthur Smith. Mr. and Mr. Smith. You can already start printing the posters.
I'm going to have a T-shirt made.
Thanks so much, Ms. Dolan. We will see you tomorrow. But earlier today,